Ken Loach es sin duda uno de los más importantes cineastas contemporáneos. Artista prolífico, director de 25 largometrajes y decenas de documentales y series para la televisión. Galardonado con una Palma de Oro en el 2006 por El viento que agita la cebada, el maestro militante acaba de recibir el pasado domingo el Premio Lumière, el Nobel del Cine. Magnífico pretexto para rendir homenaje al autor de las inolvidables que es Lluvia de piedras o Tierra y libertad. Minutos después de recibir su premio, Ken Loach nos hizo el honor de intercambiar unas palabras con nosotros.
En los años 60, Ken Loach, quien había empezado su carrera como director de teatro, incursiona en la televisión donde realiza para la BBC Cathy regresa a casa, un drama social sobre la clase media baja inglesa víctima del desempleo, el desalojo y las políticas públicas. Un trabajo tan potente que tuvo, entre otras consecuencias, la creación de nuevas leyes a favor de los sin hogar en Inglaterra. Sin nunca dejar la televisión ni el tono documental, Loach empieza una prolífica carrera como cineasta y realiza en 1969 su segunda película, Kes, la historia de un joven pobre, golpeado por la vida, pero libre de espíritu. Loach había encontrado su estilo y su esencia. Un cine social, militante y libre, preocupado por mostrar la realidad de la sociedad inglesa y de sus clases humildes.
Muchísimas gracias, señor Loach, de aceptar esta experiencia de entrevista virtual después de recibir este premio maravilloso, Premio Lumière, casi el Premio Nobel del Cinema. Hablando de virtualidad, este mundo ya lleno de imágenes virtuales y esto, ¿es algo que le interesa, la virtualidad?
Well, I find it hard to deal with, really. I mean, it's difficult enough to get one image to reflect what you want to present. So a crowd of images, I find just confusing, really. So I can't really engage with that very well. Maybe it's because I'm brought up in a different generation, and generation now could do that. But for me, I just find it confusing.
¿Podemos decir que usted es un hijo del free cinema? Es decir, muy involucrado en un tono documental, en una representación documental de la realidad.
In some sense, it's close to documentary in that you try to make something real happen in front of the camera, not just a series of set-piece things that are detached from a whole experience, a whole event. So in that way it's like documentary. But of course, when you construct fiction, you maybe take the same action from 2 or 3 positions, or you cue the action to start, and you cue the action to finish. So of course you can't do that in documentary. So the language of the camera is very different, and probably the language of the editing is slightly different. So the filmmaking process is different from something that was happening independently of the camera, and independently of what you try to set up. So yeah, the cinematic language is different. It has to be.
Aún si regularmente usa, y hasta en la última película suya, usa un tono de fábula, el realismo o la representación de la realidad parece algo muy importante en su cine.
For me, it's the interpretation of reality is I suppose is what we try to do, which means that you try to present something that feels as though it might actually be happening, because I think that's when the audience will take it seriously. If they see things that plainly could not happen, or false, or don't ring true, then they tend to reject the story or reject the characters, or to see it as fantasy, or to see it as a fairy tale, or broad comedy. So the presentation of reality is important, and also that's the most interesting. It's the most interesting, the way people really are with each other, how they interact, how they live, how they earn their living, all those decisions that they take within families, between people. That's what's interesting and complex. So it's dealing with that I find interesting and important. So, and to do that, then it has to look as though it's true.
Después de algunos años difíciles, la década de los 90 consagra a Loach como uno de los cineastas más importantes del mundo. Realiza 8 largometrajes en 10 años, entre otros los esenciales Riff Raff en 1991, Lloviendo Piedras en el 93, Tierra y Libertad en el 95 y Pan y Rosas en el 2000. Cineasta de lo contemporáneo, Loach también aborda la historia del Reino Unido y su película El viento que agita la cebada sobre la rebelión irlandesa de los años 20 es galardonada con la Palma de Oro de Cannes 2006.
Por ejemplo, al momento de dirigir, los actores regularmente esconden elementos del guión, de la narración, y esto para sorprenderles, para ganar más espontaneidad. Entonces, esta dimensión casi improvisada es muy paradójico con el hecho de ganar un montón de premios de mejor guión, por ejemplo. Igual, trabaja con actores casi sin experiencia regularmente y de su cámara nacieron, no sé, Peter Mullen, Robert Carlyle, Cillian Murphy, actores increíbles. Es un paradójico enorme, ¿no?
Well, all actors need to, whether they're experienced or not, you have to work with them. I mean, it's your job to make them as good as they can be. So it's making their path as easy as possible. It's taking the responsibility for their performance to the director and just giving them the freedom just to express the moment, whatever that is. And then there are various techniques or tricks really for enabling them to do that. Springy surprise may be one. And if they're within the piece, if they're imaginatively within the story and within the character, then their response will be true. But you don't necessarily help an actor by telling them more than they need to know. That's a judgment directors have to make.
Sus películas son retratos sociales de personajes humildes del mundo obrero y pone sobre ellos una mirada nada romántica, al revés, bastante cruda. ¿Tiene usted fe en la humanidad? ¿Es lo más importante para usted?
Oh, yeah, that's a big question. I think people are who they are, and then they're just, you know, you can't generalize. I mean, everyone has different responses, and families are immensely complex, and what we carry on from one family to another is hugely complex, and we're a great mixture. And sometimes we do things that are positive, and sometimes we do things that are negative, and I think it's impossible to generalize, really. And it's that complexity that is endlessly interesting, isn't it? And what keeps people making films or writing plays or poetry or novels or creating anything, or even talking about it, let alone trying to organize it politically. So it's just hugely complex, and I don't think you can be either optimistic or pessimistic. You just have to try and be as realistic as you can.
Artista imprescindible, Ken Loach se ha mantenido durante 40 años fiel a su ideología política y a su estilo inconfundible. Esperamos poder ver muy pronto en México su última realización, La parte de Los Ángeles.